Fortune's Favour has just been released, and there's some clear similarities between it and Hyperroll, a game mode that is planned to be removed once as a replacement.
I heard a rumor that Hyperroll was being removed. That is true-ish. And what I mean by true-ish is we do want to remove Hyperroll at some point and replace it with something better, but we will not remove it until we have something better ready. And the answer, like, we haven't even started on that something better yet, really, other than, like, paper. So it's a ways off.
So obviously from this clip, Hyperroll isn't going away just yet, but this new game mode seems to be testing the waters for potential changes or a replacement to Hyperroll. For example, they're both very similar with items, duplicators and loaded die that accelerate the pace of the game to a ridiculous extent. Mortdog also went over the problems with Hyperroll and their goal for a replacement.
Every mode we make, like a permanent game mode, has to serve a very clear player need. Right, we talked about double up. That player need is playing with friends, not competitively against friends. For Hyperroll, that player need is shorter game sessions, right? Shorter, less stressful game sessions. If we replace Hyperroll, it will be to serve the exact same need, which is shorter game sessions, less stressful. One of the reasons we think we could take another stab at Hyperroll is we think we can do better, actually. Hyperroll is actually not that much less stressful. It's actually quite a hectic game mode. It is technically time shorter, but if we want to take another stab at that shorter game mode that's a little easier to get into, a little less stressful, and again, that's still a ways off though. Until we have that, Hyperroll's not going anywhere.
Hyperroll is mostly a condensed version of normal where the core of TFT is still there. You have the same amount of augments and around the same amount of items, and that's the problem. As the devs say, there's still work to be done because it's still very hectic and stressful. So they've got to do something to stop it being so stressful, but they can't touch things like the champion pool or size because that would essentially break TFT and potentially lead to some weird manipulations around a smaller pool. And players could miss out on playing some of the cooler and more fun units in the set. There's a few reasons to make this game mode quick. Obviously so players can queue and enjoy a fast game mode as they may be limited for time. But also, if the game is prolonged, players can 3-star 4 and 5 costs and feel like they've finished the game. And this is bad because these players may not continue playing TFT. If the game mode was quick, then players will come back to keep chasing the fantasy of 3-starring these units and queue more games. So both Hyperroll and Fortune's Favour are going in the wrong direction to serve this purpose. They're just too complex and dense for a simple and fast game mode. Realistically, their only option is to reduce the number of events, but not the player's control over that event. I say event to mean things like augments, items and units. For example, they could reduce the number of augment selections to 1, but they shouldn't really change the augment pool. Or they could give players fewer components overall, but the player still chooses what items to make. So while there will be fewer potentially stressful game mechanics, the players won't feel like passengers to their own game, and they can focus on the most enjoyable part of TFT.
The most fun thing to do in TFT is press this button right here. That is the most fun thing to do for players, especially new players.
As Mort said, the most fun thing to do in TFT is to roll, so in my opinion, this new game mode should focus on rolling, which is something Hyperroll does very well already. Having no interest gold and no ability to manually level encourages the player to roll, and it prevents players from snowballing too hard where they can accrue loads of gold from interest and use that gold to hit high levels ridiculously quickly. And this is a problem that is happening in Fortune's Favour right now, where especially if you get an ergot at first carousel, players can have tons of econ and gold even after hitting level 9. I will say though, having 4 and 5 costs at first carousel is very fun, and it allows players to experience an extremely unique way to play the game, but it's probably not a good idea for this to be the case every single game, because it can get dull quite quickly. What I think they should do instead is firstly open this up to 2 and 3 costs as well, and secondly have this instance of a first carousel be a galaxy like back in set 3, where you have a different twist that altered the way you played each game. It was a fun cat in that set, and they can bring it back with Fortune's Favour, and other game modes they're planning in the future could be slowly added as well. But remember that the goal is to maximise enjoyment in the shortest amount of time. So it would make sense to reduce things like the number of augments you get. Obviously, being offered no augments would make the game very simple, but this would be a tad wasteful considering each set introduces a unique mechanic through augments like hero augments in this set. Rather, it would make sense if you're offered just one augment, that being the hero augment, which makes it even simpler for players as they would just reroll for their chosen hero. It would even be fine to be offered hero augments for 3, 4 and even 5 costs at 2-1, as it'd be similar to Fortune's Favour, which seems to be going well so far. This would allow players to still be able to consider different playstyles and which level to reroll for their hero, and they won't miss out on the set defining mechanic. However, even if there's a perfect solution on paper, there's still a massive problem.
You mentioned not liking carousel for getting items. How high on the priority list is changing that? The problem is we have to guarantee that what we replace it with is better. And the amount of time it takes to change carousel, experiment with it, figure out if it's better, the investment on return might be really, really low. So honestly, it's pretty low on the priority. It's just going to take us a long time to really find the right replacement while also developing sets, while also balancing the game, well, you know, so.
Of course, Mortdog is talking about a potential carousel rework in this clip, but you can apply the same logic to the replacement for Hyperroll. It will take time for the devs to come up with just the ideas for the replacement, let alone test it whilst also managing their other work.
So the way it works right now is we have a team of designers working on the mid set for Monsters Attack. We have a team of designers working on the set after that. And we have a team of designers working on the set after that. So right now there are 3 sets in development. And then we have a balance team, which I use quotations with no hostility whatsoever. And they try to keep the game going. So, but because we're trying to keep sets going, that takes most of our resources. It's a very content-driven heavy game.
Just to put it into perspective on how difficult this is, if there was any massive system change like new items, new set mechanics, or even a new game mode, that is a potential factor in building a set. Considering that the TFT team are already working on set 10, if any game mode was to be implemented, that would add to their workload as they would have to consider how a new set may affect the new game mode and vice versa. Another issue is that this game mode may need its own unique balancing team separate from normal. This is similar to A.R.B and Draft Pick in League of Legends, where some champions may need some love to get online, whilst other champions are completely dominant and their power needs to be reined in. So in TFT there may be some units that need to be slightly dialed back, like Urgot in Fortune's Favour. From first carousel your econ can be insane, so Urgot's chest drop rate could be slightly reduced to prevent this. And balance has to be considered, because if it's poorly balanced, players will find it frustrating to play, as the units they want to play just don't match the power of the units everyone else is playing. This is never good, as players will drop TFT altogether, which is the last thing Riot wants. But this would add even more to the concurrent work the dev team need to do to maintain TFT, and I'm sure there's many more problems and restrictions for this game mode that we're not aware of. At the very least, Fortune's Favour is probably the first of many game modes that will test certain different gimmicks and twists that a dev team are considering for this permanent replacement to Hyperroll. But it seems we're still quite far away from the final product. Anyway, hopefully this video helped inform you of the potential direction and some caveats of the new game mode. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you want to see more from me, check out my video on whether the hero mechanic is good or not, or check out what champions I think will be in set 9. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.